Good afternoon, everybody. I am Kyle Rahn. I am a former United Way CEO, and presently I am an interim CEO and an interim Chief Development Officer. I am a veteran of working in United Ways. That's where I've been a CEO and a CDO. And so I am a member of United Way Next. As you may or may not know, Carol Peters, our president and CEO, um, has led us in growing and changing and helping United Ways across the country. And I thoroughly enjoy being a member of United Way Next and doing so. I also have had the pleasure of being credentialed by the third sector company that credentialed me in my transitional or interim certification, which has been so incredibly valuable. So after many years of career in nonprofit leadership, I'm now able to utilize that area and help United Ways across the country and other nonprofits as well. Um, but in that saying that, in my experience, I would love to introduce our leader and presenter, Mr. Jeffrey Wilcox, who is the President and Chief Mission Advancement Officer for the third sector company. And I know he'll mention this, but I think it's as important to understand that he too is a former United Way executive as well. So he comes with a great deal of experience and understanding of our network. So as he leads us in this discussion, it will be very informative and well informed because he does know United Way so well. So thank you, Jeffrey.
Hey, Kyle, can everyone hear me okay? I want to make sure I'm totally accessible to all of you. Yeah, I got to say, when you have Living United in your DNA, it doesn't matter where you go. That impression of the power of synergy and the power of collective impact is something that you just carry in your heart and you carry in your mind. And I thank United Way for giving me that in my chromosome counts. I was almost 20 years started in marketing and then came up in the community impact side of the house. And that's what brings me here today. I was in fairly large United Ways that had a significant number of grantees. I also was raised in the old citizen review process and member agencies. So I come from a tradition of community impact that taught me one thing. Not-for-profit organizations weren't prepared for executive transition. And it just amazed me how often we're surprised. And coming from the community impact side of the house, wasn't it interesting that boards thought that somehow, if they continued to be underpaid their exec, they chose to not have a reserve for paying out severances and hiring, that somehow another funder was going to pick up the tab. Well, everybody, that's what got me doing what I'm doing today. I work in the area of leadership continuity, and I welcome you to be here because if you can see the slideshow, because now I'm going to start the share. And oops, that needs to start from this current slide. Thank you for a moment of just getting ready. Can everybody see that all right? So if you left right now, here's our point of view. As a thriving United Way, assuring a continuity of leadership to continually advance the mission of the organization, dare I say, at all times. Our fiduciary responsibilities and stewardship obligations to the community. You know what? I grew up thinking that the idea of fiduciary meant counting money. It doesn't, everybody. Fiduciary is about safeguarding the assets of an organization. And really, when you think about it, is there nothing more precious than the people who give the arms, the legs, the hands, and hearts of United Way in local communities all across this country? This is stepping up and saying our fiduciary responsibility isn't just for what we have in the bank account. Our fiduciary responsibility is for the time, talent, and treasure that's been made possible for our United Ways. I hope I'm not causing heartburn for anybody this early after lunch. This is why we're here. Now, let's get a couple of things straight. You see the word thriving, and I just want to give a moment here for those of you who are familiar or not familiar at all. I think you know as a network, we are very focused on the idea of what does it mean to have a thriving United Way. And there are 6 components to that. I'm starting on the left-hand side of my screen and working to the right, beginning with it takes leadership, impact, brand relevance, diversified funding streams, strong organizational foundation, and recently has added the word network of citizens. And actually, I like the word, and I was talking with another United Way CEO this morning, and we really talked about the ecosystem and United Way's role in the ecosystem. But why do I bring this up? Because I want to submit to all of you in the Thriving United Way model, the thought of succession planning for me squarely lands in a strong organizational foundation. I mean, let's think about it. United Way Worldwide has said our core capacities and values create enduring success, enabling it to be, here we go, agile, adaptive, sustainable, and relevant. How can we do that if we're not planning for the natural attrition that occurs in organizations and the natural growth of people? How am I doing so far? I need a thumbs up. Am I singing to the choir here in terms of a familiar song? So with that in mind, Ivy, we have a poll that we're going to ask everybody. And I'd like for you just to get a sense of, okay, now that we've introduced the subject, what's the reality that we're working with? Abby, is it possible to put that poll up? So for those of you who may not be able to see the print on screen, what you see is two questions. The first one says, how ready is your organization for transition in your top staff and board positions? And you have a range of circles beginning at the top with we're ready. The next circle is we're somewhat ready. The next circle is we're getting ready. The fourth circle is we're not really ready. And not surprising, the fifth circle is we're not ready at all. The second question reads in small type, does your organization have a published succession plan? You have two options. The first circle is yes, and below that is the second circle, no. Is everyone able to complete the poll?
It looks like about 50% have participated. And the second question so far is unanimous. 9 out of 9 has said the same answer.
Okay. So is it possible to see those results, Ivy?
Yep. Give me 1 second. If anyone else has some last minute answers they would like to get in, go ahead. Otherwise, I'm going to end the poll and share the results.
So the first question, 2/3 of you says we're not really ready. A couple of you are in the starting gates, and one is like, wow, readiness is like a dream at this point. But to Ivy's point, I see the size of her smile. There's not a lot of ambiguity about question number 2. Do you have a published succession plan? 100% say no. Hey, Kyle, what does your experience and gut tell you about these stats?
I'm not surprised because I've experienced it. And, change is inevitable. And there's not a question that we will have a change in leadership. It's just when. So being prepared, I think, is a natural progression, so I'm not in the least bit surprised by this because I've experienced it.
Hey, Paula, if you can hear me, I know you've been around United Way for a long time. You're a very successful executive director in the greater Hartford area. Do these numbers surprise you based on your United Way experience?
Actually, they don't surprise me. One thing that does surprise me, so the first response doesn't surprise me at all. And even though, I had a timeline, as did my predecessor, Susan Dunn, I have found that it's often it's it's kind of like putting that out there that generates the planning versus being proactive, perhaps, and as part of one's good stewardship of one's organization, having that framework in place that then you can adapt, adjust, etc. We did find that there was some material from United Way Worldwide that we did draw upon when I planned for my retirement, and that was helpful. It definitely gave us a good guideline, but once again, it wasn't looked at or started until after having had the conversation with the board chair and going through all of those steps. What I did find surprising was, if I read it correctly, Ivy, 9 out of 9 all said, yeah, we got a plan. Yeah, a
No,
published succession plan. Oh, I'm sorry, 0 said, sorry, my eyesight.
right.
Yes, that does not surprise me that no one has a published succession plan.
So therein lies our opportunity, not only to be agents of change, but I hope if we are United Ways and United Way professionals that are concerned about sustainable resources, everybody, we have got to change our language because it's the resources of people that also are as valuable and important to our future as local United Ways. We cannot be asleep at the wheel thinking, oh, we'll just find another person to do this very special job that we've done for most of our careers. So let's get started with today's agenda. This is what I've come to talk about, and I certainly hope this is what you've come to chat with us about. So here is, going back to the share. First of all, I want to talk about, we're going to change the language. We're going to change the narrative here. I'm going to stop talking about succession, and I want to start talking about leadership continuity. How many of you can remember or have seen a longtime executive goes to a board meeting and lo and behold, somebody raises their hand and says, I think we need to talk about succession planning, and you can hear a pin drop and shag carpeting. The reason why is, in my experience, because for that longtime executive, that is code for, I think it's time for us to start talking about your exit. But in a very passive-aggressive way, we're just going to say, wouldn't it be nice to talk about succession planning? Now, am I on the same planet you are? The S word is loaded. It is personal. It is emotional. It's been around for a long time. Today, we're going to talk about the language of leadership continuity for our local United Ways. I just have to ask, Melissa, we haven't met, and I'm glad we're doing it today for the first time, but I need an honest response here. Do you have a different reaction when the conversation is going to be about succession planning or a concerted effort to make sure we have leadership continuity for the future of our local United Way? Does that have any, if we were the optometrist, does lens A or lens B create any kind of different picture for you? Melissa, I wanted to make sure, Melissa Lewis, are you comfortable answering or are involved in that question? Does the use of that language have any kind of impact for you?
Yeah, I mean, number one sounds is talking about the person, and number two is about the whole organization.
You got it. Notice how that totally recast from a personal conversation about someone to a shared responsibility about the future of our United Way. This is where we have to be change agents, folks. It's not just in how we understand these words, it's how we use the language. So we're going to talk for just a moment about what are the words we use. How does a local United Way say we actually care about this and mean it? There's one thing to say, oh yeah, we're committed about leadership continuity. And there's another to say, wait a minute, is that true? I want to challenge all of you. Are we resting on the laurels of leadership continuity strictly being a staff conversation? Or are we talking about the entire resources of both staff and volunteer resources to carve the future of our organizations? I'm going to give you a sneak preview for a training that is not a part of today's subject, but is if your board said, let's hire Kyle Rahn to do a succession plan for us, does everybody around the table know what that product should look like? I got to tell you, we're going to hit on an Achilles heel of mine. For years, our United Way would contract with local consultants to do a succession plan. And you should have seen the number, they had more flavors of how this is done than Baskin-Robbins. And that got really disconcerting about what does this look like? And then how does it all end? That's what I've come to talk about. Kyle and I are going to have a conversation. You know my style, which is, Betsy, what do you think about that? Or Mike Redice, so glad you're here. What do you think about that? That's my style. If that causes any discomfort, just say, Jeffrey, I need to pass on that. But we're in a conversation today. This isn't a course with an old absent-minded professor looking for his reading glasses to get through the lecture. How does that work? Does that work for everybody? I need to see a thumbs up. Okay, for those of you who are off camera, I hope that there is an opportunity where maybe you will have an opportunity to join us at some point, because this really is about the valuing and appreciation of people, and we want to demonstrate that today as much as we can. So let's get to the language piece. Number one, for a lot of people, they say succession planning, and what they really mean is transition planning. My experience, and I'm going to ask you, and Kyle especially, to see if this matches with your experience. A person will say, well, our United Way needs a succession plan, but what they're really doing is they're saying, what are we going to do when Carol Peters leaves? Well, that's not a succession plan. That's a transition plan for Carol Peters and her position. Transition planning is a structured pathway between leaders, and that's what we're going to talk about today. But there's two other words that I think have to be part of the conversation, because if you only go down the center, you are not helping the United Way to take all of its lanes of leadership seriously. And the next lane of leadership is, it's not just about one person in the job. It's about, do we have enough hands and hearts to make sure that our mission is going to be sustainable? Do we have enough hands and hearts? And are we grooming a pipeline of hands and hearts to make sure that our mission is sustainable? That's not a transition plan. That's actually a strategic plan rooted in people versus organization. And on the other side of the freeway is, let us not forget that behind every person is an individual who has chosen to work in our United Ways because they want to make a difference. They want to make a difference. People work in our United Ways too because perhaps one day they're going to start in one position, and we're all going to rejoice because 30 years later, they've been the CEO of a major metropolitan United Way in this country, and they have demonstrated to us all what it really means to thrive in some of the most downtrodden communities in our country. If we don't do career planning, we're never going to bring our people up to the levels to be the kinds of future leaders our network needs. Succession planning, transition planning, and career planning. It's accounting for the organization, its positions, and its people, and it takes all three. All right, I got to stop. Kyle, what do you think about that when we change the narrative?
Well, I know for me that our United Ways, local United Ways, exists because of the trust for its community. So by doing continuity planning, it's how we ensure this trust survives beyond one CEO, that one person you just referenced, beyond the board chair, the person, or the leadership team. And those of us that are on this call can cite several United Ways that we've seen where, God forbid, something happened to the CEO, whether it was under their own steam or health issue. This is a critical, important thing that we really address and look at. And so this really resonates with me, as you and I have talked about for 3 or 4 years. So it's important.
Kyle, you have really hit on a gold nugget here, and everybody, I've put it in the chat box. You use the word trust. And let's be honest here. If your experience is like mine, and I think Kyle's, it isn't that people trust the United Way as much as they trust United Way's people. Because the minute they stop trusting United Way's people, wouldn't you agree, Betsy? You're going to stop trusting the United Way. You know, as long as that Jeffrey Wilcox is at the United Way of Yakima County, don't ever expect me to give a dime. Betsy McCann, welcome from Yakima County. Glad you're here.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So I've written in the chat box, the community must trust the United Way, and that trust is usually rooted in trusting relationships with the United Way's people. What would happen in a local United Way if we just took leadership on making these three avenues paramount to most of our conversations? What would happen? Anybody? Well, I hope it's a more active conversation than this one. Anybody?
We'd be prepared. We would have been prepared.
That's right. we're counting. Yes, more. Kyle?
I want to say something. I thought about this a lot as we've prepared for this. Those of us on this call probably all have a will and an estate plan
Right.
because we want to leave our families in a successful position. To me, this is really the same school of thought. So by doing what you just asked, and what you just asked is, if we do it personally, why would we not do it professionally for our community? And if we're going to set the standard because of the trust that we garner in our community, then people will look at us when we lose a CEO. Why, United Way's the stake in the center of our community. Why did they not plan well? Oh boy. So
Right.
it reflects on us in a negative way. So
It certainly does. And experience has also taught me that if we're a United Way who's looking for ways to demonstrate that we
that,
are wanting to advance equity, we're wanting to advance inclusion, we value belongingness, we expect accessibility, and our beauty is in our diversity. I guarantee you these three tracks, if done well, is one of the most visible commitments that we're going to celebrate the diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility, and belongingness of our people because we look at it through three lenses: the good of the organization, the good of the positions that are within our organization, and the good of the people who occupy those positions. It's a very powerful statement. So, moving on to the next agenda item. So, Jeffrey, this is really nice how theoretically beautiful this is. Now, you got to bring me back to reality here because I'm in a United Way and we're struggling like everybody else. How do we integrate this from a nice conversation to part and parcel of our work? And actually, there are 5 ways in which we recommend this has happened. Number one, we believe that there needs to be an annual, what I call what if conversation. And this is what it means. I'm going to do just a slight role play for just a moment. Carol Peters is my board chair and I'm the executive director. And so I'm going to, and by the way, Kyle Rahn is my incoming board chair. So the three of us are going to have a conversation. Here's what it looks like. Kyle and Carol, as we work together over the next year, I think you and I both know it may be possible that something could happen to any of the three of us or the people who depend upon us for leadership. I have prepared a memorandum, and that memorandum, if something should happen to me this year, these are my ideas and instructions for the board and executive committee to consider in my absence. It is a written document in the form of a memorandum. So, Carol and Kyle, I'd like to give you a memorandum from me to you in your leadership positions that if something unforeseen should happen to me this year, I'd like for you to have my input and ideas so that you can carry on in my absence. Also, Carol and Kyle, I have direct reports. I have direct reports that I think we really care about, like my chief financial officer, and you care about my chief resource development officer. Am I correct? Well, as board leaders, I need your help that if one of those positions should become vacant in the next year, to give the other board members assurance that we already have a contingency plan we have talked about that will kick in if that should happen. That will also allow you to help me to not have the board get into a hiring process that really you and I, as incoming and current board chair, has agreed is best for operations. So, and now I'm going to stop the role play, but I would end this by saying, Kyle and Carol, I'd like to give you this memorandum, and I'd like to work through it with you, see if it's understandable, see if you have any questions, and based on your current roles, if you would make any suggestions, so that if the unforeseen thing should happen to me or any of my staff people this year, we've already figured out what we're going to do. Carol Peters, if you were my board chair, how would you feel about that if the executive director gave that to you every year?
I would be relieved. I say this because I work with a lot of boards and a lot of board chairs who contact us because they are in this exact situation. There's been a sudden change with the leadership at the helm, and this isn't necessarily somebody who's just decided to vacate their position, but there's been 2 recent deaths in our network that were unexpected. I mean, people passed. There's been people who have had to take significant time off for medical leaves, and no one's really thinking about those moments. And those are things we can't control, right? My decision to retire and give advance notice is something that can be more planned and strategic. But this just, I mean, honestly, Jeffrey, this makes me stop and think we need to do this within our organization just to be proactive and protect this, our human capital, which is the team in place who can step in, right? But also prepare the organization, because our volunteers aren't necessarily prepared to step in and be the interim, right? But many of them feel like that's they're forced into that. So anyways, I'll stop there. So thanks. That's a great point.
I love that relief. And everybody, here's the secret sauce in this menu item. Notice that the incoming chair, Kyle Rahn, who hasn't really in the position yet, is sitting down with the executive director and is already having a conversation about something unforeseen potentially happening while she's in the job. Kyle, how did you feel during this role play as the incoming chair that the ED gave you a memo outlining exactly what would happen in the case of unforeseen absence?
Well, how did I feel? I felt a sense of relief because this is an awkward topic for board members. They think they're being disloyal or untoward the CEO, when in fact, it's really, in this case, the CEO's role to say, stuff happens, let's plan. You want me to do the strategic plan? I'm giving you, Kyle, as board chair, the strategic plan, the continuity of leadership plan in case something, not in case, when change happens, it will happen. Okay, that's the elephant in the corner of the room. So as a board chairman, I'm, like Carol said, relieved. Thank you for taking this awkward spot and making it easy.
What we're doing is we're taking leadership responsibility for the continuity of the leadership of our organization while it's under our watch. Yes. And we are also showing responsibility for it when we aren't even here to be watching. Now, there's an extra piece to this. So also in that memorandum, when Carol and Kyle go to the board and say, we've met with Jeffrey, and Jeffrey has kind of outlined what would happen in the unforeseen, or if we should have a vacancy in key positions. We've also talked about it if something should happen to one of us. And that also goes to the board. So this is no longer about continuity of leadership, just about who's on the payroll. This is about all the people that matter. And as we get good at this, I, as an executive director, and I've been with very large United Ways, I expected my CFO to also give me a memo to tell me what I'm supposed to do if we lose the controller this year. Because I got to tell you, I was not in the mood as a United Way CEO to be figuring out how to be without a controller overnight. So I expected my direct reports in large United Ways to give me a similar email, and I gave Carol and Kyle the same assurance in my large United Way that I'm having the same discussion with my direct reports so that the key positions throughout the organization have been accounted for in unforeseen circumstances. Everybody, this is what's behind door number 1. You have to have an official what if conversation every single year, and it has to be documented in the form of a memorandum, and it is shared widely that we are prepared for executive or leadership transition. In the unforeseen, it's kind of like, let me show you the oxygen mask on this flight. You really don't want to need to use it, but when it does fall out of the air, you want to know how to put it on. And you know the golden rule on that one, put it on yourself and then assist others. All right, any questions about that? Paula, am I earning my stripes here? How did that land with you as a large United Way CEO?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things, and you do have it in a bullet point on the previous slide about organizational planning. Oftentimes, I think there is a tendency to think about succession planning with a specific individual or position in mind, and missing the part that succession planning is critical to organizational planning and organizational development. And it also signals, I believe, to employees that while we're talking about or framing a succession plan for our CEO, we, I believe, local United Ways should also be committed to succession planning for other key positions within the organization. Not only is it good business sense, but think about it from the perspective of employee, of culture, and of employee morale. They see a path, they see a development path, and they also see the commitment of the board and senior leadership to cultivating leaders. So, not looking at this as individual programs and are you part of a leadership program with United Way? What is our local United Way doing and embracing? Culture, professional development, organizational planning, organizational inventory, and being prepared for all of the what ifs, not just a retirement. What if the person sadly becomes ill? So there's also a component here about like what goes into effect when. But great stuff. Wish I knew all of this before.
Well, thank
Paula,
you. And you know, yes, Kyle?
I was just going to say to add on to Paula's, because she had it perfectly, is it's not just illness or death, God forbid, but I just talked to a United Way that CEO's wife got a fabulous new role and they're moving. And never would you expect that, right? Oh, I'm not interested in moving, and you get your spouse gets that call. So it's really in all these circumstances because change does happen. So being prepared.
Let's not make transition a bad thing.
Right.
Let's make transition a natural occurrence in the course of business. And let's also not make this a privileged conversation that only a few people matter. Let's make sure that we move towards all people matter in this process. All right, so let's move to the next piece if everybody's ready for this. So that is what I'll call step one, the practice. You signed up for a class today which says positioning United Ways for effective transition. Positioning number one, we are looking at potential transition and doing something about it. Now, for those of you who are from extremely small United Ways, the same holds true. And in fact, there's an argument to be made, it's even more important, that if some of your key positions were to leave, what would you do? Do not make transition the need for a crisis intervention. What would we do if we lost our treasurer this year? And if you have very limited staff, that could paralyze an executive director who has little financial background and will pay the price that they shouldn't have to pay for lack of transition planning, that the organization take responsibility, that we all have to have a good treasurer, and it's just not the executive director's fault. Am I causing any angst by making that statement to you? Benita, does that make you angry to hear somebody say? Benita is an accomplished and well-known United Way executive herself for a small United Way.
I agree with you 100%. I've experienced the loss of staff, key staff in a small United Way, and the smaller you are, the higher the percentage of what's left to sort of pick up the pieces and keep going. So,
Yep.
sorry I didn't have as much detail around career building within and succession planning for my organization, but I've learned a lot and really hope to encourage others to really see it through that lens of just how critical our people are.
So Ivy, I have prepared an example memo. If you could put a link to that in the chat box, people can get it, because I'm going to go to the next one in the spirit of time. We talked about the practice. Now we're going to talk about policy. I believe the second takeaway in all of this is, if we're going to be serious about transition, we also have to have board policy about how a transition is going to be handled, especially in the CEO position. The worst thing that we can do is throw together a search committee who doesn't know what they are supposed to do and have absolutely no experience or help to be a good executive search committee. I believe, and I submit to you, by policy, a board has to think about the role, function, responsibilities, and composition of a search committee before they need one. Because by policy, when that position is vacated, there is a set of protocols that people have already thought about, not in the midst of transition, but because they understand it's going to happen. There's also an insurance policy behind this, everybody. Communities in United Ways cannot afford bad hires. Does everybody agree with that? Local United Ways cannot afford to have a revolving door reputation. The only way we can safeguard that as United Way people is to make sure that we have board policy that looks at our hiring process and at a reasonable level has detailed, this is how we hire for this important job, not for the United Way. This is how we hire for this important job for the community, which is why we demand a search committee that's comprised of the following constituencies. This is why we demand that the search process contain the following touch points. This is why we're clarifying the role of staff in executive search before the question is even asked. And we also are inviting consideration of an interim executive director by policy so that we don't hire this position too fast and don't give our organization ample pause to recollect, and reconnect what the recalibration is going to look like. Was that too many words? Joan, am I talking too fast or too many words here for your comfort level? Everybody meet Joan Brown from Allen County, Pennsylvania, Allen County, Indiana in Fort Wayne. All right, we've given you an example of that policy. So Ivy, if you could make sure that the policy example is in the chat box as part of our takeaway prizes from today's show. Third, and this actually is kind of the one that's like, ooh, I like this one best. So stick around. This on the popularity wheel. What I'm about to talk about next usually scores high, and I'm going to check in to see if our trajectory is continuing. So here's what it is. The third thing is we believe there should be the completion of an agency inventory. And let me tell you what an agency inventory is. An agency inventory is a document that tells somebody where everything is at. So it's kind of like if we go back, Kyle, to the mom and dad's estate. Oh my gosh, what was mom's password on the computer system? Where's that at? How many credit cards did she have? Families that don't have that kind of record, it's a whole different ballgame if any of you have been through that before. So here's what an agency inventory does. It tells the leadership where to find the things they need to be an effective leader. Examples. Who are the current signers of checks on our banking account? Who is responsible for our investment portfolio and their email and phone number? Who are the 5 largest contributors to this organization that probably it would be in my best interest to say, Mike Radice, my name is Jeffrey Wilcox. We've never met before, but I want to call you and thank you for being one of the 5 largest contributors to our local United Way. Mike, you may have heard that we're going through a transition right now. And I wanted to call you as a board member and let you know that we have a transition plan in place. These are the highlights of it. This is my name and number because, Mike, I have to tell you, our United Way would not be what it is today without your giving. And as we go through this transition, your giving is even more important to us than ever before. If someone doesn't know who your largest contributors are, how can you reach out to them and give them the assurance that the organization is going to be okay so that our gifts are not threatened by the transition? Kyle, you are an expert fundraiser. How does this land with you that somebody needs to know who our top contributors are to manage that as part of a transition?
It totally lands smack dab in front of me, sir. It is and whether you're a CEO who is a fundraiser or not, you still need to know that for the prime reason you just stated, calling them and saying, I'm here, everything's good, Don and Debbie Donor, really appreciate you. Please continue, giving. Let's have coffee. So yeah, lands beautifully. Thank you.
So item number 4, this is the one that hurts. This is the one that's like, okay, does everybody love the idea of the inventory? Complete this at the time you do your annual budget. Because here's the beauty of the inventory. It also says, you know what, maybe we should probably look for a new vendor in a particular area. This is a good way to review your vendors because it's like reminding you, oh gosh, we have all these business relationships and we really haven't sat back and get this, done a succession plan for vendors who've been with us for decades. Oh my gosh, Melissa Lewis has done our books for 29 years, and all of a sudden Melissa can't do it anymore. Did we have a succession plan for that vendor? No, we did not. What are we going to do? Item number 4. This is the one that hurts. Every year, we recommend if a local United Way is going to be prepared for executive transition, you have to set aside some money to plan for it. Executive transition is unaccounted costs. I've never known any executive transition that was free. And I defy anybody who sits on your board to think this is a free ride. There has to be a pool of funds for the board to draw upon that goes part and parcel with transition. And you know what? Sometimes that involves a severance. Whether we like that or not, it is the way of the world. And sometimes we have to pay a little to have a really good interim to get us to the next place. If we've not built a cushion for transition with money, how can we afford to give our organization the transition it deserves to be a better service to our community? So this is a very simple one. The 4th takeaway is we have to look at our budgeting process, and are we just setting aside a little bit for that rainy day when the fact is we're going to have a transition? Oh, that's great, Ivy. I feel this would be paired really well with the business recovery plan our United Way had. Wow, if you could get your hands on that, that would be wonderful to share with folks. I'd love to see it. And then finally, the last one. It has to do with making this a part and parcel of conversation. Well, how are we going to advance our people to have the skills necessary to be the kind of United Way we want to be? This is more about executive transition, also has to be an investment in employee retention. Because if you invest in employee retention, guess what you don't have to do sometimes? Invest in executive transition. Paula, does this make sense? For some folks, they would say this is robbing Peter to pay Paul, depending on their background. But the fact of the matter is, or their nose to spite their face, you have to sometimes invest in retaining people as opposed to expending costs to when they leave. Paula, react to that.
Yeah, I agree totally. I think that, as I reflect on my career, there were times where I clearly, just it wasn't a given succession planning, in terms of a particular path. But what was clear was that the organization was saying was that we want to continue to invest in you because you are part of this team. You're part of what's going to help this organization move forward. And at the time, it wasn't as though I was necessarily thinking about the CEO position, but I did feel that what the board was communicating was that it is a leadership team, and we are investing in that team. And continuity is important, and development is important. So I do think that it's hugely important because whenever there is transition in any role, we do have to be cognizant of the effect it has, not only on service delivery, but again, on the culture of the organization. We want our greatest human resource, our people, to be focused on mission and to still feel excited about what they're doing and not be worried about their jobs, right?
That's right. And to Kyle's point, I don't think we can underestimate what it does in the erosion of our community equity. When people leave, your community equity that you've built and built through those people can go with you, and we must never forget that. So here's a recap on this. You came to learn about how do we position United Ways for effective transition? Well, we do it in 5 ways. We prepare for it and talk about it, and we're proactive about it instead of worried. We have some policies that safeguard that anybody in this organization has guardrails and guidelines for how to do it. We know where things are at, and we've been realistic in the management of even our tightest resources, that some of those resources have to be directed to serving ourselves so that we can serve the community. And that also that transitional leadership is just parcel of how the organization works. Well, there's a couple of things here as we're running out of time. Just some questions I've put on this calendar for you to think about, or the screen to think about. When you think about your own situation, what are the barriers that you would encounter? You might make a list of that. And then what's your role in breaking down those barriers? And I just want to continue to give a plug. Do not fall into the nonprofit habit that this conversation is only about staff. Because when that happens, we've stopped being community-based organizations. We have become staff-based organizations, and our succession plan will validate that. So last thing here. If you would put in the chat box, we've talked a lot about transition today, but I'm going to do the 30-second station identification. That if, again, Carol Peters is my board chair, and I said, Carol, I really think that we should be investing in a succession plan. And Carol says, well, what are we buying? I need to, as an executive director, and I need to, as a committee chair, be able to say to the entire board, when you buy a succession plan, what should you be buying? And so in conclusion, I want you to think about a notebook, and that notebook has 6 tabs. Tab number 1, we're going to make some statements about the value of people and how people are the heart of the mission of this organization, including our deliberate approach to diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility, and belongingness as an organization. Tab 2, we've talked a lot about today. We've planned for emergencies. Tab 3, these are our policies. Tab 4, this is how we intend to grow and retain people, including it may be a human resources policy manual and a volunteer manual. Number 5 was my favorite one as a United Way professional responsible for community impact. I used to tell people who presented their strategic plan, when it had 8 pages about how they were going to raise money, I asked them where were the pages about how they're going to raise up people. And they looked at me like I had 6 heads. Resource development is money and people. And finally, the final tab is all of the documents necessary for the organization to continue in its ability to serve the community. Everybody, it's been a pleasure being with you today. The question is, what's going to be your next step as a result of this conversation? If this had any value at all, we've given you models, we've given you handouts, and we are here. On July the 30th, we're going to offer a 3-hour seminar on succession planning. Eric is going to lead that for us. Eric Seelbach from Third Sector Company from Tacoma, Washington. Eric, thanks for all you do. And so I think there is, I got to go to my chat box. There we go, the upcoming succession planning. If you're interested in becoming an interim executive director, we have an academy starting this fall. United Way Next members receive a 30% discount. And please keep in mind, if you know any nonprofit that is going through transition, we have a community of people who've been trained and willing to help an organization build the bridge between its prideful past and its hopeful future. And Kyle Rahn is one of the poster children of that particular magic that occurs in this kind of work. Everybody, thanks for being here. Ivy, I'm going to turn it back over to you to make sure that with little time we have, I stay the course as best as possible.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yes. So I did drop the links in the chat, and I have another one for you guys in just a second. One of the things I wanted to mention is I did receive a couple of messages. I will make sure that you are able to get all of the links in an email. You don't have to try and grab everything out of the chat. It is okay. I will make sure you have access to all of those. I will make sure that if there is like a handout or something you can download, it should be easy to do so. And I will do everything I can on my end to make sure you have everything you are looking for: the slides, the recording, the links, the resources, everything that Jeffrey and his team have shared behind the scenes with me. You should have access to all of that when I send out the recording and the replay. And I did just want to say, if anyone has any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. If we've got time, I know that they would be willing to answer them. If we don't, it is possible that they might respond to them over email, and I can send them out to the larger group, things like that, because we do know that you might have a meeting at the top of the hour. And I did just want to give a special shout out to our sponsors: Mutual of America, Front Stream, Third Sector Company, Board Build, UPIC Solutions, and I know that there is one more give pulse for supporting these events, as well as our mentorship programs and all of the other member resources that we have, like becoming an interim executive and hiring an interim executive if you need it. So those links are in there. And then my final request before Q&A is just, if you have like less than 60 seconds when you leave this call, you just fill out the 3-question survey at the end, just to let us know if you enjoyed the event, if you enjoyed the content, if there's anything else you're looking for. I make sure to read all of those, and if there is something I can link to or provide, or maybe Jeffrey or Kyle or someone else has access to, I will give you guys anything that I can find.
All right, well, let's open it up for Q&A. What questions do you have, or even just some thoughts or feedback? How did this resonate with each of you? And don't be shy. Yeah, don't be shy. Feel free to unmute. And I'll just start. I think it was just a gentle reminder to me, as I hear United Way CEOs, especially in the network, but even our alumni members and our retirees who are serving on boards, and they're thinking about their leaders and the support that they provide, that we need to be advocates for others and encourage them to really prepare this, at least at minimum, this memorandum that has the details around how to proceed forward, right? And it's like, that's not a nice to have, that's a must do. And then from there, take the path forward to really develop the plan that is needed, so it really prepares for that continuity when there is a leadership transition. And as Kyle has said a couple times in her commentary, it's inevitable, right? These life changes, things happen, and we have to be prepared for it.
If I can add, I mean, certainly in my travels in my community, it's in many of our communities, United Way is sort of the hub in your community. And while we need to take care of our United Ways first, there's certainly that ability for us to spread that message to all of the nonprofits that we work with, because they are experiencing the same challenges that I think the United Way system is as well.
Voices are important here. Melissa, Betsy, Mike, comments, thoughts? You'll have me worried if I leave the group feeling like we just, kind of left the room quiet. Well, I will just remind everybody of one thing. When I've worked in United Ways and when I had the job, I had to remind people of something that is so easy to forget. We were united in purpose before we were united in money. We were united in community before we were united in money. And because we were united in purpose, and because we were united in community, we had the joy of being united in resources to make something happen. We have got to make sure that our hierarchy of where we are united is as important now than ever before. And that is certainly people before pennies. Kyle, am I causing you indigestion at the last minute? I can't thank you enough, Kyle, for participating today. Any final word from you?
No, just we must tend to this detail in our leadership.
Right.
I just wanted to mention, I saw Betsy came unmuted, so I wanted to see if she had a comment.
Oh, well, thank you, Carol. I just decided to go ahead and do that. I recently participated in the training on interim leadership. And so I'm still synthesizing and absorbing a lot of that experience. Jeffrey and Joan provided all of that. But I've heard a lot of words today that strengthen my commitment to trying to, in even small ways with organizations, to support changes in culture that make it easier for people to do their work and then to leave and come and go and still have organizations standing strongly for incoming people and those who exit. My children are 32 and 29, young people working in the world, one in nonprofits and one in business. And I think a lot about all of this as I look at their futures and the things that I encourage them to think about in their work. So that this is really valuable. And I appreciate everyone's comments as well, because we have a lot of work to do. And I think having more folks able to have the language and able to have the conversations is really important. Thank you all.
Thanks, Betsy. That's great.
You have just personified the mission of United Way Next, and you have personified the position of third sector company. Wow, what a compliment. All right, everybody, we hope to see you at a succession planning workshop soon. And if we can be a resource to you in taking Betsy's enthusiasm and taking this theory and turn it into practice, just let us know. We'll be in your back pocket sooner than you can turn around. Everybody, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Jeffrey.
Thank you, Kyle. And thanks to Ivy for all your facilitation behind the scenes and everything that you've done. I just want to say, as we wrap up with just the minute that's left, that today is just really the first step in this journey. The door is now open as you think about your United Way, your nonprofit, the community where you live. Know that we are standing at the ready to be of support to you in partnership with Third Sector Company and the work that they do with interim executive leadership, continuity solution. And if there's anything that we can do as United Way Next to support you individually in your journey, because there's some new names and faces on the screen today, I just want to invite you to consider. Ivy does include in the follow-up email some information about United Way Next as well. I mean, we are the Alumni Association. We're here for current and former United Way professionals, and we really value you being a part of the work that we're doing. And we're just here to support you as individuals in your journey wherever you are. And if there's anyone listening to this afterwards or guests that have participated that aren't actually affiliated with United Way, which is possible because anyone can register for our sessions, we're more than happy to make that connection to Third Sector Company and keep this conversation going. So thanks to everybody, and thanks again to Jeffrey, Kyle, and the team at Third Sector Company for all the great work that you do. And we will look forward to seeing you at our next event, which, Ivy, can you let us know what's coming up next on the docket that these folks might benefit from joining?
Yes, so on the 24th, there is Developing Your Board for Fundraising Success. On the 30th, Creating an Engagement Strategy That Wins with Alicia Adamson. And then on August 25th, there will be events in between, but that one is titled I'm Losing Board Members, and it's wonderful with TD Smyers. So in case you want to stick on the board route, there are some regarding that, but there are also going to be next chapter chats and United Way town halls and community roundtables and all of the things. So I'll make sure you guys have links to them as well.
Great. Thanks, Ivy, for everything you do. And thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.